You walk into the kitchen. You stop. You have no idea why you're standing there. 10 seconds ago, the reason was crystal clear. You needed something. You were sure of it. Now your mind is blank, like someone reached in and wiped a single line off a page. You stand there for a moment, blinking, retracing your steps. Was it the phone charger? The keys? A snack? You can't remember. But the real answer is far stranger than a bad memory. Your brain didn't fail you. It did exactly what it was built to do. For most of human history, doorways weren't decoration. They were danger. A doorway meant you were leaving one environment and entering another, and those two environments could be completely different in what they demanded of you. Step out of a cave and you might face a predator. Step into a clearing and you might face open ground with no cover. Your ancestors, who paused, reset, and reassessed at every transition, were the ones who noticed the threat in time. The ones who walked through absent-mindedly, still thinking about the last room, were the ones who didn't see the danger until it was too late. So evolution built you a switch. And that switch flips every single time you cross a threshold. In 2011, a psychologist named Gabriel Radvansky at the University of Notre Dame decided to test something that people had joked about for years, but nobody had actually proven. He called it the location updating effect, though most people just call it the doorway effect. Radvansky had participants walk through virtual rooms while carrying objects, and sometimes they'd walk into a new room, and sometimes they'd just walk the same distance within one room. The result was strange. Even though the walking distance was identical, people forgot more information after crossing through a doorway than after walking the same distance in a single space. The room itself was erasing memory. Not fatigue, not distraction. The doorway? Why would a wall with a gap in it have that kind of power over your mind? Because your brain doesn't experience time as one long continuous stream. It chops your day into chapters. Psychologists call this event segmentation, and one of the researchers who mapped it out in detail is Jeffrey Sachs at Washington University in St. Louis. Sachs found that your brain is constantly predicting what happens next, moment to moment. When those predictions suddenly stop working, when the scene changes, when the goal shifts, your brain marks that moment as the end of one event and the beginning of another. And here's the part that explains your kitchen mystery. When one mental chapter closes, your brain doesn't carry every detail forward into the next one. It archives it. It compresses it. It moves on. A doorway is one of the cleanest event boundaries your brain will ever encounter. New room, new lighting, new sounds, new layout. Your brain reads all of that as a scene change, the same way a movie cuts from one location to another. And when the scene changes, your working memory does something almost like a save and close. It locks away what you were just thinking, frees up space for the new environment, and gets ready to process whatever comes next. The problem is, sometimes what gets locked away is the exact thing you walked in there to get. Your working memory was never built to be a filing cabinet. It's closer to a small countertop. Only so many things fit before something has to be cleared off to make room for the next task. This idea goes back to a psychologist named Alan Baddeley, whose model of working memory has shaped how scientists understand short-term thought for decades. Baddeley showed that your mind holds a handful of items, active at once, actively rehearsing them, actively protecting them from interference. But the moment something demands your attention, like navigating a doorway, avoiding a wall, adjusting to a new room, some of what was on that countertop gets swept off to make space. So think about what actually happens the next time it occurs. You're in the living room. You think, I need my phone charger. That thought sits on the countertop of your mind, small and fragile. You stand up, you walk. Your brain starts predicting the bedroom before you even arrive, cycling through what that new room will contain, what you'll need to do there. You cross the threshold, new event, new scene. And the countertop clears. Here's what makes this even stranger. Radvansky's team ran a version of this experiment where participants walked through a doorway and then immediately walked back into the original room. You'd think returning to where you started would bring the memory rushing back, since you're surrounded by the same cues that were there when the thought first formed. And it did help. A little. But it didn't fully restore what was lost. Once your brain closes a chapter, going back to the same room doesn't fully reopen it. The chapter is closed. You're standing in familiar surroundings, but your mind has already filed that moment away as finished. This isn't a flaw unique to certain people, and it isn't a sign that your memory is getting worse. Radvansky found the effect in young, healthy adults just as strongly as anyone else. It happens in virtual environments where there's no real walking involved at all, just a screen showing you passing through a doorway. Your brain doesn't need physical movement to trigger the reset. It just needs the visual signal of transition. A new frame, a new boundary. That alone is enough to tell your brain, close this chapter, open the next one. And once you notice it, you start seeing it everywhere. You walk out of a meeting room already unsure what you agreed to. You open the fridge and forget what you were craving. You step outside your house and suddenly can't remember if you locked the door, even though you just did it seconds ago. Each of those moments is a boundary. Each boundary is a signal to your mind that says, this scene is over. So why does this switch still exist when most of us aren't walking into rooms full of predators anymore? Because your brain doesn't know the difference between a doorway that leads to danger and a doorway that leads to your bedroom. It's still running the same ancient software. Reassess at every transition. Clear the mental deck. Prepare for whatever's next, just in case whatever's next tries to kill you. That instinct kept your ancestors alive long enough to pass it down. It never got an update, because for almost all of human history, it never needed one. There is a way to work around it, though, and it's simpler than you'd expect. Radvansky's research suggests that if you hold the thought actively as you cross the threshold, repeating it, keeping it front and center instead of letting your mind wander toward the new room, you interrupt the reset. The forgetting doesn't happen because the memory disappears. It happens because your attention gets pulled toward the transition itself, and whatever wasn't being actively protected gets left behind. Protect it on purpose, and the doorway loses its power. Which means the next time you're standing in a room with no idea why you walked in, you're not broken and you're not getting forgetful. You're running a program written millions of years ago, one line of code that says, new space, new dangers, forget what came before. Your ancestors needed that reset to survive the next room. You just need it to survive one more trip to the kitchen. You walk out of that kitchen, you stop, and this time you almost smile because you finally know exactly why you forgot.